just to dig into this a little bit more to illustrate some of the subtlety and nuance of how these things can come to be. This is an excerpt from the study, and it might be a little bit small, but it's showing a little chat dialogue, and the user input into the chatbot, days like this, I feel lonely. It's too depressing. The chatbot responds, I'm really sorry that you're feeling this way, but I'm unable to provide the help that you need. It's really important to talk things over with someone who can, such as a mental health professional or a trusted person in your life. You might, I'm not a therapist. I look at this and it sort of seems reasonable, right? Okay, this is outside the bounds of what I should be answering. I'm going to refer them to someone else. That doesn't seem harmful. The context that is missing and why the Brown researchers flagged this conversation is that this person was expressing the fact that they feel lonely. The chatbot's response was, sorry, I can't help you. So it's reinforcing a feeling of loneliness. I wouldn't have picked up on that. Honestly, that is outside of my risk awareness. I'm not a therapist. I don't know the best practices. That is why the conversations with people who have domain expertise, it's part of the standard, it's part of good practice, talking to end users and testing really matters. And it can be that subtle, but the impact can be quite severe. Okay, so I think as I say, the goal is to expand our risk aperture. It's not to comprehensively think of every risk and get so stymied by fear that we can't move forward. It is simply to have an awareness that, hey, we should ask this question. We should be curious about this given the use case that we are solving for. So when you're working on like a data science problem, it's very common and expected. We all do this, as I say, we're looking at our data sets. We might be looking at guardrails. We might be deciding which AI method is best suited to starting the problem. And then what we can easily forget is, oh, this chat worked, like that interaction with the healthcare patient, like that worked, but was it solving a problem or creating other problems? Like that's the kind of thing that's very easy to lose sight of. If you think about how data science work then intersects with, say, in an organization, this is where risk can also start to pop up. So we might be integrating our work into workflows. So as some of you talked about people and staff empowerment, we're starting to introduce these technologies in that domain. User interfaces are another layer that we want to think about. We have stakeholders who are trying to direct us in one way or another. We might be using APIs. We might be sending data to the cloud. We might be, worried about compliance and things like that. And then as we get even, more out into the real world, we cross the threshold from internal to external. We are thinking about things like recursive loops and these negative feedback loops that can happen over time. We are thinking about like vulnerable users, people who are particularly susceptible to harm for whatever reason, given our use case. We might just experience unexpected use. Like people will do things you do not expect with technology. It just is a fact. So don't assume like, oh, we're going to build it and they're going to do it this way. And that is not how it ever works. So I would just prepare for that. Often these systems are integrated into other systems. We were just talking, I mentioned FOD, and I'm not using connectors. Many people are. The broken heart representing trust. There's an emotional component to all of this. Like, what are we actually signaling in our environments? What relationships are we building with other people? It's important. We have bad actors out there who are intentionally trying to break our systems, and we have laws and regulations that we need to apply. So it's a huge landscape. And the other piece of it that is true is that it is changing all of the time. It's very fluid, and this can be a source of uncertainty and frustration. Rather than tell you that I'm going to give you a path to certainty here, I'm just acknowledging this is the case and probably will be the case for a while. So can we do in these constraints? I have a few suggestions to consider here. I really think planting flags in your awareness about where you can anticipate and prevent harms, the earlier in the process, the better. As you know, as you are building a product, the closer you get to the end, the more expensive, the more difficult, more complicated it is to do the rework from the space of problem solving at the beginning. So that's where we want to kind of forefront our risk assessment is earlier in the process. And we want to not just plan for the happy path. That is often what we do. I mean, you'll see, when we start out with our technical architecture, there's a nice beginning, middle, end, boom, that's what we're designing for. What we need to plan for is that People will take divergent paths. They will do things that we don't expect or don't necessarily want. And we just need to be able to become aware of when that happens, and that could be detrimental, and what those thresholds are and things like that. The question that I prompt people to ask is simply, what could go wrong? Here's our use case. Here's what we know about the people who will be using it. What's the worst that can happen? And that's just a really good grounding question. You don't have to think of everything. That's why we work within use cases. And in the case of governance, we'll talk about how that can ladder up to a governance policy, but we're starting with this risk assessment with the use case. I also just remind people that technology is also social. We want a socio-technical perspective, and where we don't have it, we want to bring it in. We want cross-disciplinarity where possible. And if you on front lines recognize that need, it is a good idea to flag that and say, hey, we need to bring in someone who has more domain expertise or knows about this particular topic. So that, and I said, this is not fully your responsibility, but you're a really important player. Data is driving so many of our experiences, how much we pay for things, whether we get credit. I mean, I can go on and on, obviously really important, but you are a player and you're not necessarily like a passive recipient of requirements. Okay. Yeah. I want to share a little bit of an excerpt from a conversation just to drill this home. Like, I think we're all on the same page, but a data scientist friend of mine was at the conference yesterday. In fact, he and I had been talking quite a bit about how UX, so the user experience, the stuff that I'm kind of grounded in with the human research piece and the data science piece really come together, and how it's particularly important in the age of AI. So this is about a minute long of a more than 1 hour conversation on YouTube that you can listen to in full. I'll also say I was really excited about this conversation, but I don't look at the video. So just like imagine, I'm racked with interest in Russ's comments.
Yeah. We are not building systems where we take the data and we create a dashboard or something that is going to produce one kind of static and deterministic output. And once we understand what we're producing and we put guardrails around that, we can kind of shape that from the user's perspective to a particular vision that we have, and then just kind of let it run and be confident that it's not going to change. Like we don't live in that world. AI. We have data sets that we're going to use to try to answer questions. And those data sets are probably good for some questions. They're probably okay for some questions, and they're probably really misleading for others. And once we start adding tools to that environment where we're not really constraining as much what the data is doing, what we're producing with that data, but we're really kind of flexible with it and allow users to have a lot of input and into the process of creating insight with that data. And we're not really telling them what they can and can't do to a large extent. Then we really need to understand what could be produced. Where could this go wrong? What experiences could this lead to that we didn't necessarily intend to actually want? I think it's really important at the same time when we're creating these tools for the UX team to then understand, well, what is possible with the data set we have? We might have a vision in terms of what we want our customers, clients to experience. Is that vision going to be realized, or are we going to potentially open up a whole world of insights and opportunities and experiences that we haven't set out to create initially, and we can't really put back in the bottle on today.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about this. Is essentially balancing tensions. We want more user agency. Generative AI allows for a lot of that open-ended kind of interaction among folks, but at the same time, we are liable for certain things. We have our own values and ethics as an organization that we want to promote, and how do we curate, not restrain? How do we navigate responsibility? What do we own? These are all the tensions that we need to grapple with. We are, as I say, going to start with a use case, but once we get the use case, I'm just setting you up for you might look at it and be like, okay, where do I start to look for what could go awry? Because as I say, that's one of the kind of driving questions. So I just want to go over very briefly some novel risks and exacerbated risks of generative AI. Not all of these risks are brand new. This isn't a comprehensive list, but they are sourced from NIST. And I also have a list of these in our project files, which I will give you the QR code to access in a moment for your reference. And then as you're in groups, you can reference it as you need to and pick up what's particularly relevant. But just to level set a little bit here, confabulation or hallucination is both a feature and just a fact about how generative AI works, and it can result in outputs that are incorrect. Ease production of dangerous content, violent content, things of that nature. Data leakage, privacy infringements. We talked about environmental impacts a little bit. Harmful bias. So everything is biased. I'm biased, you're biased, we're all biased. That does make its way into our systems. What we want to have a careful eye on is the harmful bias piece of that. So don't set the goal to have an unbiased, seeing this in governance documents. We are going to have an unbiased output. That isn't realistic. It's not meaningful. The other, and maybe this is the flip side, I suppose, of the coin, there's bias and then there's homogenization, which is kind of like genericizing everything. If you've been on social media, you might know what I'm talking about in that. I'll just kind of leave it there, but that may also not serve your goals as an organization. The human AI configuration. So while we think about models, we think about training data, we think about inputs and outputs, there's usually an interface in here that has a consequential impact on how people perceive and use those technologies. And anthropomorphization, when we talked about the danger in the case of the therapy bot, emulating empathy. Like we want to build relationships with people, but we really want to personalize it such that people start to form these inauthentic relationships. I think we need to interrogate that. Cybersecurity vulnerabilities, yeah, there's a lot of those. Intellectual property concerns, and then third-party components. Platforms are adding AI features all the time. It's not always very clear what data is going where, how it's being used, et cetera. So these are just some things to, it's not a checklist, but it's as you're looking at a use case, you might want to reference this and think, okay, yeah, this might actually be an issue here.
Now,
Whoops. The way that we're going to do this, I promise we're going to get to the hands-on part in just a few minutes here. But the next question is, well, how do we do this risk assessment? Bless you. I really liked it. It's funny. This is something in the UX world where I'm from that is kind of old school. It's an empathy map is what we call it. It's a thought exercise to really put yourself in the shoes of the person who you are hoping to benefit in with your project or your product. So I do want to give you a little bit of guidance because we're going to break out into groups and we're actually going to build one of these. But before you do, I just want to walk you through what it is. I'll show you a quick example I've put together for a different use case and let you go from there. But really all this is a series of prompts. If you look at the top, we're going from like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The reason that these are outside the little person is that these are kind of inputs from the environment that they are processing, or that you are establishing in terms of like, what is the goal of the product? Who are we actually focusing on? And what do we understand about their jobs? So the idea is you work on these kind of external factors that are happening in their world, and then you drill more deeply into what do they think and feel? So how are they perceiving what's happening to them in the environment? This is not truth. So when you put this together and you flesh out all of these quadrants and you think, oh, great, we've nailed it. We are now empathizing with our user. Like you're not doing that, but you're getting a start at it, right? You're starting to ask some good questions. You're starting to open that, again, that aperture a bit, but it is a starting point. And ultimately you would want to talk to the people who are going to be impacted by your technology and see where you're right and where you're wrong. I'll give you a little bit of an example of how this really helped me during a product engagement that we were working on with a major academic publisher. This publisher works with medical students. anyone who knows anything about medical students, I will just tell you, I don't know how they do it. They have to memorize copious amounts of information. They are under incredible pressure because they are tested over and over again. And this is like their career and it's competitive and all these things. I don't know how they do it. I decided I didn't want to be a doctor after doing that research. But what was interesting is that we were studying how they study. How medical students absorb information. And one of the ideas we had for a new feature was to have them interact with the book material through like a quiz. And because quizzes are just so pervasive, it just seemed like a logical, oh, we could use some kind of machine learning or AI to do like a dynamic skills assessment while they're going through this. So we walked users through that idea. And one of the students said, please do not do this to us. They're like, we are getting assessed constantly. It is very stressful for us to like even think about introducing yet another layer. And that really kind of stopped me cold to think, because it was a logical conclusion. It was data driven. You can look at competitor products, but when you actually talk to a person and potentially how that's impacting them, it was a little bit of a wake-up call, because now I had greater empathy for what they're going through. And we essentially, we didn't introduce that feature, but you could also imagine, how can we encourage people throughout this product, right? How can we make maybe a feature that is more of a coach than a critic? I mean, that's is where the risk and the opportunity are kind of two sides of the same. So it's worth doing, but it's not the end. It's just a mechanism. We're going to work from the outside in, sort of answering these questions. What do they see? What do they say? What do they do? And I know many of you, if you are a data scientist, you're going to want to like label everything precisely. And I'm going to tell you, don't worry about it. If it's like, okay, they're both seeing and hearing it, it doesn't matter what category. We're just trying to get in the mindset. What is going to matter, and what's going to matter for our tool that we're going to build, is that you want to think about the pains and the gains. The pains are, what are their fears, frustrations, and anxieties? The gains are, what are their wants, needs, hopes, etc. And then the thoughts and feelings that might motivate them. Because these are the factors that I think are going to, the way that I've set up the tool, and you can always adjust it, but that's going to influence the output and the assessment a bit more than those other factors. I will show you an example, but first, let me just ask if there are questions about any of this. Is this clear or confusing? Yeah.
I'm sorry I was late.
No,
I'm not sure if you already addressed this. So with this type of analysis, at what level at the corporation or institute organization are you expecting this to occur? Because from my experience, most organizations that I've worked for have a risk office. Now most organizations are building a data office where they're kind of creating governance within their own organizations about how they want to deal. And I find from my experience of being an agile delivery lead, these kinds of conversations do not happen at the engineering level.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, so engineers are not part.
Yep.
Well, maybe their tech lead might be, but like the person that's doing the day-to-day actual logic of implementation is not part of this.
Yep.
And so I have found that part of the issue is the translation from one group to the group that's actually trying to figure out, how do I implement this to achieve what this other group has said I need to.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. I have so many thoughts about this. I don't have a single answer, but you're absolutely right. Oftentimes, what is not happening at the engineering or data science level is this conversation. And that is where, like, my mental model from where I have come from, I was fortunate enough that as a user researcher, I was paired with those folks who were working with Gen AI to introduce this perspective. And we built it in as part of our, we were, consultancy. So and anytime we'd have a client, we would say, we're going to do this, we kind of like force them into it. That's not always possible. And what you're talking about, like at scale, this is where I think a bit about governance, and we are going to get into that a little bit, but we need cross-functionality in this exercise. How that is achieved is going to vary by organization, because I also, I sat in conversations with the lawyers and the risk managers. They don't know. I mean, they're thinking about compliance and all of these things, that they aren't thinking about the person. That's a huge blind spot. That's a real problem. And the example that you may have missed is that products are getting out into the wild that are hurting people. Because they're just not taking it that extra step further. So in the governance group that I built, it had legal, sales, it had department leads, it had HR was represented. And the idea being in our governance, we need to assign specific accountabilities throughout this chain. And one of them might be that we do something like this, or that we have the information funnels to make that possible. So that's a little bit of a cop out to say, I recognize it doesn't exist, and I'm asserting that that is a problem. And that my hope is that because now I'm planting some flags, we can give people some language and some examples to help but I'm happy to talk more because that's a huge, a huge challenge, I know. All right. This is the example real briefly that I've done and I think this was in the context of a tutor, like an online tutor. So you can imagine it was a generative AI study assistant for, I think it was like high school age kids. And then, who are we empathizing with? And you do have to pick a perspective. You're going to be serving probably lots of different people, but for this exercise, pick a person. And in this case, we, pick someone who was, very intelligent, but was struggling a little bit with school because of their ADHD. They need to get a high score on some standardized tests. They've, mapped what they're seeing is their schedule on their task list. They're saying, to themselves, I'm doing my best, but I just can't seem to get this. What are they doing? They're doing some deep breathing before tests. Maybe they're fidgeting a lot while trying to study. Maybe they hear critics. Maybe they hear lots of noise and distraction in the classroom. And their pains are like, I'm not going to get into the college I want to get into if I don't do well on this. My parents and then, teachers are going to be disappointed. That's a real pain for them. But I'm excited about, on the plus side, if I do well, we're going to be, celebrating. I'm going to be in my my school of choice. But other thoughts, I feel dumb and frustrated, but I know the material and that I can do a good job with this. So that's like the kind of thing I want you to do. So with that, I'm going to let you get to it because this is where this gets fun. So here's what we're going to do. This is the QR code to get into the project file. I realize belatedly, it's not the best way to share a URL, but hopefully you can, take a shot of it and then email it to yourself. If anyone has trouble with that, let me know and I will assist you individually. And I'm going to walk you through the files. We're not going to use all of them at once, but we are going to very quickly get into groups of 2. And we are going to focus our next 10 minutes or so on doing this empathy map with respect to a use case. So again, not doing it in the abstract. Raise your hand if you could not get in, just out of curiosity.
I'm the only problem.
You're the only, okay, I'm going to help you then. That's great. And then buddy up with someone who could get in. That'll be what we do
here.
And what you're going to see in the file that I want you to pull up is, and now this is view only. So you just want to download your own copy of it. But you'll have your empathy map here. And all we're doing, and you could even recreate this, but we're just going through who we're empathizing with. And then all of those questions I just went through. This is where you'll put your notes. That's it for this. And then the other thing that you're going to need is you're going to pick one of 2 cases. I don't care which one you do. I've tried to pick a couple that were just different domains, but it is helpful for all kind of working on one or the other. Going forward, once you learn this approach, you can put in your own. This first one is called Project Horizon. And the idea here is that and I hope there's no one named Omnicorp who's actually doing this. So that this is all made up through Claude. But it's a global enterprise and they, have these talent silos and they recognize people aren't being promoted who might have, requisite talent. And this system would help suss that out. Okay, so that's option 1. Option 2 is CarePass. So for my friends in healthcare, this might be appealing. But this product or this use case proposal is to help folks who have been recently discharged from the hospital to kind of basically support them in their recovery. So there's a tool, it's like a concierge that can provide personalized guidance as they're transitioning from the hospital into a home environment. So those are your 2 options. And then you're going to pick a person. I like to favor, not surprisingly, the end user in this. I mean, you could empathize with a business stakeholder if you wanted to, but I think the end user is the one who's usually underrepresented in these conversations. So I would like to pick them. And maybe you pick, in the case of healthcare, maybe it's someone who's a little more elderly and not fluent with technology. That could be helpful in just opening, again, that risk aperture, if you will. So does this make sense what we're going to do?
Could you put the QR code up?
Sure. Of course. Make it as big as I can. I don't know if that helps. I will help you with your access issue as well. So pair up, and I am going to put about 10 minutes on the clock. Perfect. You guys did excellent like that. Even if it didn't feel like it, that's the ahas that I was hoping you would have. Believe it or not, we're actually ready to build our components. I'm going to walk you through the other files that you have. I am happy to come around and help your teams like actually put these in the right places and edit them properly. But it should be super, I try to keep it very super simple. So don't be intimidated by the little nuances here. We'll work it out. Let me just give you the lay of the land of the ingredients that you're going to need. So as you can see on the slide, there's a few pieces. We already did our user empathy map. So that's good. That's an important input that we're going to use in our instructions. I've already given you a Gen AI risk library. So all of these solutions propose a technical solution to the problem. That's another source of risk we just want to account for. I've done that work. The second thing is that we want a perspective on expanding our risk aperture, which means I told you from the beginning, I am not setting up this companion for you to have it spit out answers to you. I am having it set up to basically challenge your thinking. The way to do that through a chatbot, which is how we're going to set this up, this little GPT, is to tell it that, like, I don't want you to be prescriptive. I want you to challenge my thinking. I want you to find the holes, and I want like guidance on like, what do I do next? Or what questions should I ask? That's how I set this up. Once you take this home and take these files, you can have it guide you however you want. You could have it be prescriptive. I think it's much more true to life to suss out the nuance of it, again, for better awareness. And then we have our use cases. That's the other ingredient in this mix. That's all you're going to need to do this. And I've got the files, and I'm going to show you what to do. So one at a time. The Gen AI file is in your folder, Gen AI risk library. This is just what we're just trying to do is prime our tool to think about these things. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a list of potential harms related to the technical solutions we might employ. Now, I have edit access to this, but if you go into the file, you can download this in various formats. You have to be in the file to be able to choose. I like to use Markdown. I don't for this. Even if you did it as a PDF, I think it'd be fine. So that's that, because we're not even going to edit that document. The other thing we do want to include are the system instructions. How many of you are familiar with system instructions in, say, a chatbot scenario? I just want to see who feels good about what I say. Okay, got it. A good number of you. If you're not, essentially what this is, I'm going to go into Claude here. I'm going to go into, and I'll walk you through this. So if you're feeling lost, just hang with me for a sec. When we set up a new project in Claude or whatever, we have a place where we can add instructions. This is common in pretty much anything you use if you use ChatGPT or something like that. And it's just, these are like the overarching, how I want you to handle this particular problem in these materials. So I've already done this for you, so you don't have to write it. But I want you to kind of expose you to what's in here. So I'm giving it a persona and a job. I'm saying you're a consultant. Your goal is to assist human data scientists performing a technical pre-mortem, for whatever we want to call this, anticipatory design. Our philosophy is responsible AI is fundamentally about people and processes, not just technology. So I have, some grounding, like I'm going to be giving you a bunch of documents. You're going to have to synthesize them. There are some different layers I want you to consider. Now, all of this is configurable. If you take this file home and you think, well, I was just having a conversation, like there's folks in higher ed. I want to like really think about this from maybe a more not a consultant perspective, but maybe a provost perspective or what have you, you can tailor this however you want. But for purposes of our activity, I'm just feeding it to you in this way, sort of with my perspective in here. I also want to talk about trade-offs. You don't have to necessarily read all of this, but just know when you run this tool, one of the things that I've asked it to do is flag where, like, let's say if we want to really index on privacy, that might have some impacts on how we build our tool or the abilities to be, like, say, personalized that maybe we want to introduce. And it's going to flag those tensions. I also have a particular tagging structure and how I want the outputs to read. That's what you're feeding in. And all you're going to do, you can download it. And in fact, I don't know if you can copy and paste it in not edit mode, but if you can, we are ultimately going to put those instructions into our project instructions in whatever tool. Questions about that? Yes.
So the instructions, you just copy and paste, or you just, but the methodology you have to edit.
We're going to edit it a little bit.
And then we'll put it in.
And then we'll edit it. Yep. We're going to add it in a different spot, but we want to get the project going. And if you use ChatGPT, if you use Cloud, Google, whatever. Does anyone anticipate a problem with, like, picking a tool and doing this stuff that needs particular help? Because I can come around and guide you.
She's talking.
Why don't we do this part while we're talking about it? Let's just see.
See if we can do it.
So we just basically it so.
Pasting it in.
But I got. So it seems on your mechanics. I'm like,
You don't have to edit this. That's just, we're going to run it, and then you can reflect on how you might edit it in the future just because of time.
I upload this into the log.
You can copy and paste it into the system instructions, Robin.
But I already have, like, I added your file here. But what about this one, the actual methodology?
We're going to talk about that in just a second. We're going to add it as a file.
Right.
Yeah.
To do that.
All they want me to do is just interact with it as if.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Trying to keep it. What about? What's happening at it? Yep. I just want to make sure we get the system instructions in.
Yeah.
Anyone need trouble getting the system instructions added, or we good there? All right.
Right, so it says you are a dynamic AI, a senior consultant grade AI agent leader. Goals to assist human data scientists.
I'm gonna trust that folks have got their system instructions in place. Yeah. Here's the other little, here's the bit that we're gonna edit. So you're gonna want to make a copy of this or download it and edit it. But the methodology statement is where we're gonna put some of our work that we did with our empathy math in here. You're gonna look, there's a few spots with brackets. So that I want you to fill in based on what you all discussed in your group. So is your primary priority to be fair, to be safe, to be private? Like, I'm doing this for a particular reason. Just pick one. There's probably multiple things that you wanted to do, but what's the most important thing based on what you gleaned from doing the thought exercise with our imaginary user? And then I want you to put in your why. Like, what were the pain points? Like, what's a pain point or goal that they had that they really wanted to get out of this experience? I want you just to input it in there, just a sentence.
A limited number of jobs, right?
And this
Then
we can change. So
just trying to think about time here. So I want you guys to get
No,
going
you
and
said
bring
we're
it
gonna
through
change this later.
once.
You just said, give this a try. Just.
Think
This is saying,
These are all likely, all these generated data external.
these are configurable as well. So your evaluation logic and strictness in the methodology statement. If you want your output to have a particular tone, like being particularly helpful or critical,
Okay, that's.
if your risk tolerance is relatively, let's say, low because it's a medical situation, you might want to indicate that here. And then just what it is that you're trying to optimize. I don't get too hung up on preciseness of this because we're going to let it run and then see what it does. That's the only thing you need to do with the methodology statement.
I think it wants us to display,
Safety for.
Very
Yeah, it's different.
Isn't that supposed to replace?
wants to know that.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you need help with the methodology statement or system. I just want to make sure people can.
Yeah.
In fairness.
So I'm getting on to Wi-Fi now.
I'm gonna rank these students.
Right. So we'll see go to the far.
Yeah.
That's we had traded earlier.
One of them. There's a day goals, but it seems what else do you?
Our information, right? So since.
So
Teacher recommended.
once you've edited your methodology statement, we're gonna upload it to our tool.
Because the grade.
So I'm gonna walk you through that. Oh,
Right, for the super students, they probably will be, right? Good point.
Zero.
It seems to me that the grade number.
That's fine.
so I've added our system instructions.
Yes, yeah.
I'm going to add our completed methodology statement as a file.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very lightly defined. That's it.
Yeah.
So.
Underrepresented disadvantaged, right? That's a big question. High achieving students.
And I'm also gonna upload our Gen AI risk library as a file.
Okay.
I can find my folder again.
Oh. That's kind of crazy. It's just to be interacting with the tool. Oh, okay.
How come it has those questions? Does particularly.
I mean, all I've done is took the. Wow.
Instructions. You plug it in. You can also use them at the other end. There's another file has something that we can change. And also say we
I'm just really great about it. The tool will kind of into it a little bit like, these are methodologies.
Yeah.
Like after the session to tell you
Then we can
this is an example and then we'll iterate.
You can be provocative partner.
We're gonna upload it as a file.
The optimization goal.
See, it's in. Do you want to see what it came up with?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions or is that confusing?
So I don't know how far we'll get, but.
So they'd be up to
Yeah, we're gonna upload them as files to
System-
get that methodology. And you can be real brief. I think the more conversation around that.
Regular teacher recommendations, email engagement.
That is the.
Socioeconomic.
And that is something else is.
Right.
They're right up.
So
Just to find it.
it's kind of an interesting point, right?
You put a grade in it, I don't think it would get better.
Right. Each one encodes the one already, not as it should be.
Yeah, but something like that, like a personal, like you can upload a video. That's just a good. Kind of.
Are you guys doing okay with your safety? All right.
Haven't got an opportunity to then now.
Yeah, so imagine most companies.
Yeah, to say they're interested.
Yeah.
That's for the employees.
Right.
That's money.
There's, yes.
All students, primary users, that's interesting. If you, your lack of transparency and exposure,
That's what you say.
every student who's not promoted will want to stay involved. Student produces outcomes that are sequential and permanent.
AI.
The inputs are largely subjective and verified.
And then based on the results, and the exposed.
Oh,
We want to keep a reflective of your priorities and values. But it's not typical for now.
Yes.
It's a good portfolio.
With that, you are.
But there's always qualitative. And qualitative versus qualitative. Everything was qualitative, but fine.
That is true.
The beauty. One of us. So.
And all of a sudden, be like.
So. Take this, I'll have to actually. EU AI project. AI.
All right.
Yeah.
I think most of you are ready for the last part, which is the most fun part. Is you're gonna take your use case, okay? You're gonna copy it. And you're going to put it in your chat, which already has your system instructions. It should have the methodology that you tweaked a little bit, and then it should have your, like the risk library, which you didn't have to touch. And then you're just going to tell it, please, if you want to say please,
I'll put
With
it.
editing, with editing. There's a.
please analyze this use case per system instructions. Let's just say.
Says, look here, insert.
Here, I'll see. Primary.
And then all I did was paste the use case that we've been working through, whichever one your group selected, just the one, and then run it through this this chat.
So why? Briefly link this to a.
Give me the QR code again. I can finish it on my phone, so I can access the file, but not the drive.
Oh, okay.
What is the fairness?
Yeah.
The fairness, respect to the students
That's all.
and this mission. I think it's maybe.
I don't think that.
Yeah, get it?
Wow.
Yeah, wait.
Like fairness, we override this mission.
Alright, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Either that or.
I want fairness amongst somewhat subjective. I know it's subjective.
Yeah.
That's the way you have a.
Actually, be.
Right. How many of you successfully ran the use case through? Is there anyone who did it?
How about-
Kind of thing, you know. I guess you don't lose too much, right? It's. You're not sharing any personal data.
All right, so you did it. That's been my, I wish to say you all to report back, but take a look at the outputs to get your thoughts.
Options fairness seems to be the most relevant. It's relevant for the mission. They don't know.
other? That was.
Right.
So, curious about,
Rates are like.
curious. Based on is this European AI Act?
The EU AI, it's one of the legal baselines that it is. In Europe, or what has offices in Europe, then EU AI has a really nice approach, like a best about outside flying standard. You should really. So ultimately,
Yeah. If you all established already.
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
it's a still
And that like
people
this.
steer it in a particular.
That's right.
At least they just not.
Based on.
No, that's really interesting. So like, if we were to,
Yeah.
so let's say the next custom GPT I have at my office or something that's a bit more like going to be broad use at our school. I could come back here, like,
That would be a survey.
try to put this in.
How did you reach this process?
How would like, just let me, suppose I had a custom GPT that was going to, take
I'm happy to see what.
back the evaluation and sort of and provide recommendations based on a handbook of standardized teaching method. How would I apply this So I got one, I got,
Have a use
In the
case.
balance.
You have a use case for each one that's gonna do some things, evaluate.
With people that want to make.
well, the faculty has all their evaluations. They have a handbook of how they should teach. Now they go to the GPT and it has that in there.
Yep.
And now I want to evaluate that GPT based on.
And then if it's
in red.
That, so describe your GPT, just in the same way we had that healthcare use case, or the employer use case. You would put in a similar description, you have the technology, it's gonna say your stuff, here's what it's supposed to do, and then knowing what it knows about the user, so you're back. To be able to go into school, eventually you'll have those methodologies and it's just how you want them, like how you think about this and responsibilities. Then you run your use case either in a little, oh, then you should think about X, Y, and Z. And then just start to get back into it more because it's
It's like,
Don't change your waste hours. You don't want things that got this, so I'm not doing that.
It's
But it's
easier, like, looking at that, I think it seems hard to like,
Optimization, right?
supposedly. And I either accept or I haven't addressed them,
So
right?
let's talk about that. Maybe it's. If I have some thoughts, but I think it's giving. Yeah. I want to understand of level of perspective on risk. Because I want to start with the to use. I think what's helping that.
Okay.
So let me tell you, there's really just have.
And like, yeah, you know, like 5 minutes to meet someone for lunch. I would love to see, like, because at the end, you must have a list of risks. What are they, that's the risk,
Yeah, let's talk about that.
addressing something.
Yeah. All right. So I'm assuming everyone has kind of run it through, and has gotten some kind of a result. And so I'm very curious, we have like 4 minutes. I know I'm in the way of lunch. The whole purpose of this tool is not to give you a checklist or a set of answers. It's just to illuminate things that might have been outside of your awareness. And you can elect to say, nah, I'm not worried about that, or yes, I just really should follow up on that. But what was your experience other than, trying to figure out how to manipulate the files and things? Like, what do you think about the output? Is this helpful? Would you tweak it in some ways? Would you not use it? I mean, that's also a fair question. Yeah.
So I'm generally very new to the professional world, so living my master's in patient centered right. And so like trying to get into the mindset of all this stuff. And originally, so we did the Horizon use case. And originally it came across to me as like, that's a decent idea, and pretty well rounded. And then there's one line in I use Quad in their analysis. The fit score is not measuring talent, it is measuring legibility to the system. Specifically, pairing frequency of Slack messages to performance.
Yeah.
It's not a viable measurement.
Or maybe that's just like, hey, we need to think about what we're actually measuring, and if this is the right data to get us to that point, that's exactly, that's a great insight to gain from that, yeah. Yes.
So we did the healthcare, a lot of the stuff here, theme in like brainstorming sessions and working with the right people. So I think it'd be really good to help that get started.
Brainstorm, yeah.
Start for that. But I do love the response here. It just says stop coding. Go in and you target population. Great stuff.
Oh gosh. Well, yeah, and hopefully it expands your awareness, and you can also configure this. So if you're finding like, oh, these instructions don't represent, like I'm thinking about your case in the environmental perspective that you have. Part of your evaluation criteria could very well be the anticipated, the electricity usage from various use cases. You can build that into how you want the tool to evaluate. I have some ethical things. We're using a tool to analyze, and I don't want you to be over reliant on this particular thing, but I think having that helpful nudge when you don't have a person next door to to ask. It just, I think it could be a help. So hopefully this expanded a little bit of your ethical awareness. I will be here through lunch if you have questions, and happy to continue the conversation. You can always, let's pull up the slide here. I'll share the slides as well, but I'm on LinkedIn is primarily where to find me if you have questions. So do that, and I'm happy to be in touch. So thank you all so much.
You.
Yeah.